behind me, right here, is the Polynesian Resort Hotel. Now, the Polynesian has a rich history with the Walt Disney Company. It was one of the original operating hotels, the first one of two that came up that Disney owned and operated. And it had a lot of interesting features to it. For instance, there used to be, over in that area, right over there, there's a little marina. And there used to be many different kinds of boats that would come out of that marina. There were sailboats and speedboats and pontoon boats and float-around boats and you name it. There was a lot of different boats. These days, since the pandemic, you don't see the boats there anymore. The other thing is, a little further over, in the open space there used to be the Polynesian luau that I want to talk about for just a moment, because the Polynesian luau was kind of a fun way to experience the spirit of aloha and kind of get the feeling of the Polynesian village and so forth. But there were other things here as well. For instance, at some point in time, there used to be a Chinese junk that would float along in here. And it was something that Disney had bought and had in the waters that they would bring out and show to you at times. And then finally, there was a really interesting thing that happened. On that island, right there, there was a wave machine in front of it. Yep, an actual mechanical device that would lift up and down and create waves. You can see some waves crashing onto the shore here just because of the nature of the water and the boats and the wind and so forth. There are little waves here. But the intent was to use a wave machine there to actually create waves that would crash onto the shore and you could actually surf them. So in the early days of the Walt Disney World Resort, that wave machine was running and you could actually surf out here for a very short time before they closed it down. There were mechanical issues and other things that happened and we decided to abandon it. It's abandoned in place. It's actually sitting there under the water right in front of that island. So that's one of those interesting things that's been lost to history at the Walt Disney World Resort. A really kind of a cool idea. This was a Polynesian resort hotel where you would actually get the spirit of being in Polynesia and feeling like you were there in some way. And for me as a kid, I always kind of felt like that. Every time I came here, I felt like I was taken away to somewhere else. And I had this fantasy about being in Samoa or somewhere in Hawaii or something like that, or French Polynesia, where it would be something like this. And I became fascinated with shows like Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum P.I. and other shows that took place on the Hawaiian Islands, because you really got that feel for it a little bit. And this is really kind of neat. It still has that essence of it, even though the spirit of it is kind of lost, because we don't have the kind of cool things. It still looks very Polynesian in the style of the way they've created it, but it's different in what they've done. The first question we have to ask is, why did Disney want to create a hotel based on a South Pacific concept on Tahiti, Samoa, the French Polynesian Islands, and on Hawaii for that matter? And it all ties back to Robert Louis Stevenson and the fact that Polynesia became something really fascinating. He lived in Tahiti for a long period of time with his family, and it actually became something he wrote about significantly. And Treasure Island is kind of loosely based on that concept. And then during the Second World War, all of these South Pacific islands, including Hawaii, became of interest. And for the next 20 or 25 years, there was a lot of adventures that happened there. There was the South Seas adventure that happened. There was the movie South Pacific, and there was a number of different songs that were well known into the 1950s and 60s that related back to a lot of things on these Pacific islands. It was kind of a fascinating thing that all of these sailors and soldiers brought home with them this love for this far-off land. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Walt Disney himself taking a family vacation to Hawaii in the early 1950s. He fell in love with the tiki culture, with the idea of having this far-off land that had adventures in it, but yet was so relaxing and by the beach. And it became something that inspired him to create the Enchanted Tiki Room. That's where this comes from originally. And so naturally, the South Seas Resort was this idea that was born and was something that he wanted to have at Disney World so people could come there and experience the South Seas themselves, be in the Pacific region. So if you look at the architecture and the styles of what goes on there, this is what the Polynesian looks like. And if we go back and we look at islands in French Polynesia, we see that they're very similar in the styling and the way that they're put together. These pitched roofs, these other things that are happening with the waters and the palm trees and other things, they kind of look like this. So from the other side, this is what the Polynesian looks like. And you can see how it kind of flows the same way that these other regions do. And then you look at some of the rainforests they have on some of these islands, and they have these tropical plants and these waterfalls and other things that are going on there. And they were inspired to create something that was in the atrium, in the main lobby of the hotel, that looked very much like what you see on these Polynesian islands. It's really kind of exciting, and it's kind of a shame that they changed it, but you get the idea. And then there was this idea for the Chinese junk that I mentioned before. This was a craft that they put on the water. Now, a Chinese junk doesn't really exactly fit within the idea of French Polynesia, but it does in a way, because you think about the South Pacific and the things that are out there, and that's why they did it. Now, another thing that the islands in Polynesia are known for is surfing, or at least they are in sort of a colloquial sense. We think about surfing, and we think about Tahiti, and we think about Bora Bora and all these exciting places where you can go surfing. So these are actual surfing events that have happened over the years in these islands that I'm showing here, just to give you a sense of kind of why it becomes that wonder, why it became something that they wanted to do. When you look at all of this different surfing and sort of the natural landscapes, it fits in with the idea of the Polynesian Resort Hotel. So Dick Nunes said, you know what, we should create some sort of a surfing adventure that we could have at the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. And they created, in the little nook there you kind of see in the middle of the screen, it's a submerged platform that just goes up and down and pumps the water to create waves. Now today, it doesn't work. They have it turned off, and I think they've removed parts of it, but it's mostly there on that island. That's where it sat, and they actually were pumping water up and down to make it come across to the shore to create waves on this man-made lagoon called the Seven Seas Lagoon. So if you look at it in different perspectives, you can kind of see where it was and how it came together. There's many pictures out there that show some still shots of kind of how it looked. It's in the top portion of that. And then you can see someone surfing. They actually did run it for about 6 months or so. And this is where it would come up on the shore, just along here. The problem was twofold. First, it was a mechanical thing that was hard to maintain. It took a lot of money to maintain it because it was underwater and it had a mechanical part to it and some electrical parts, so it was really hard to keep up. And the second problem was the bigger one, and that's there was beach erosion that was caused by the waves going up and down and lapping at the shore. Beach erosion really wasn't well understood at that point in time, so it was something that they had to consider. But Disney, in their infinite wisdom, decided, you know what, we'll put on a water show anyway, and we'll do some other things. So they had a lot of skiing shows and a lot of other things they did after they closed the wave machine. After they decided that it wasn't going to work anymore, they were doing some other things there to make it kind of fun. So at least guests were entertained, even if they couldn't go out there and kind of enjoy it themselves. But that's the story of the wave machine and what was there in the Magic Kingdom at some point in time along the Polynesian shores. Now, never forget that a good idea never dies at Disney. Over at Typhoon Lagoon, they created a wave machine, a specific wave pool that allows people to surf. So they did keep the concept alive and allow people to surf over at the Typhoon Lagoon, and you can get out there and you can surf every day. So it's kind of a neat thing that they've allowed for people to do and keep the spirit of Aloha alive, if you will. Now, if you look around the Typhoon Lagoon, you get the sense that it's that same sort of tropical feeling. It's that same sort of thing they have going on there, where you feel like you're in a Polynesian island or maybe Hawaii or something. It's sort of a vague notion of it. But that's the way it works. Now let's move on and talk about the watercraft. It may seem starkly empty now, but back in the 70s, this marina was filled with all types of watercraft. You could take out and enjoy a day on the Seven Seas Lagoon. In fact, it was part of your vacation. You might go out and enjoy some water sports and take a different boat or something out onto the lagoon and have some fun. So there was many different things you could use. You could use sailboats or motorboats or larger pontoon type boats or these little things called bob-arounds that were a lot of fun. But it was an interesting time that you could go out there on the water and enjoy it. And it was a nominal fee to go out there and kind of have some fun with it. So it really was remarkable what they had out there at the time. And it really did capture the imagination as far as what you could do. By the 1990s, you were down to just speedboats. Those were the only things that were left. They were called the Water Mouse, and you could take them out and go around the Seven Seas Lagoon in a fun adventure. And they existed until about 2020, when they sold them all off as the pandemic was raging on. And today, you really have almost no boats except for maybe some pontoon boats that you can take out on the water. And now let's talk about the Polynesian luau. The concept was to have the Polynesian resort kind of represent the islands of Polynesia, including Hawaii, with traditional type luau shows with food and dancing and things that they would have going on that would be typical of what you would see there. So they started this about 3 weeks after the opening of the Magic Kingdom, and well, it looked something like this.
Everyone seated in the
This was always a crowd pleaser and something that people enjoyed going to, but unfortunately, with the expansion of the vacation club, it's now gone away. But the spirit of aloha continues on with an actual Hawaiian resort called Aulani that Disney has created. And if you look at the way Aulani is designed, it looks very much like the Polynesian resort, sort of tying it back full circle from going from Polynesia to Florida back to Polynesia, where they created something that is a full service resort that's something like the Polynesian Resort Hotel.